live to start. Okay, we're learning the Maimer Kumi Oiri, Kiva Orech. It's in Prina Melukat Gimel. That was said in Tafshin Lamed Gimel on Chayel on Shabbos, and it was published on the occasion of Chayel in the year Tafshin Memtes. And the day of Chayel is, of course, the day of the birthday of the Shnei Ma'eres HaGedolim, the two great luminaries, the Baal Shem Tov, and in Nachas, in Tafnun Ches, which is approximately 325 years ago, I believe, and the Alter Rebbe in Kahos, which is like 278 years ago, I believe. Okay, we are holding Eis Daled. So let's just make a quick general introduction, and then we'll make a more particular introduction to today's shir. So the general introduction is that the Dibra Maskal of the Maimon is Kumi Eiri Kiva Erich, that the Eibishter tells the Yidden, rise and shine, rise and give out your light because your light has come. And the Rebbe says, so there are two Nyanim over here. There's Eir, or Eiri, and Eirech. The Rebbe wants to know what are these two things. Then the Rebbe brings a second pasuk, which is Ki imcha mekerchayim ba'irchen nira Eir, which the Rebbe brings from the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer. It's an American Maimer from over here in America, where the Frierdiker Rebbe explains that there are four madregas, there are four levels in this pasuk. Ki imcha meker chayim ba'ircha nira eir. The four levels are chayim, life, and then there's meker chayim with the Eibishter, right? The title of the pasuk is Ki imcha meker chayim, with you, Eibishter, is the well of life, the way the Frierdiker Rebbe teaches it. Ba'ircha, in your light, nira eir, we will see light. So he says there's four madregas enumerated in this pasuk. The first madrega is Chaim, is life. The second madrega, which is higher than it, is Mekoir Chaim, is the source of life. Higher than that is Eircha, and higher than that is Eir. And in this Maimer, the Rebbe tries to explain, the Rebbe does explain, and we will try to understand what these four madregas are. What's Chaim, what's Mekoir Chaim, what's Eircha, and what's Eir. So what we learned previously is the first two madregas, Chaim and Mekoir Chaim. Or at least we thought we did. We'll find out that there's more to go in Mekoir Chaim. So Chaim is the life that the Eibishter puts into this world. It's the Eir HaMemale. In other words, it's a very limited and restricted level of light that could descend to this lowly physical world, or even, relatively speaking, to the lower worlds of Bri, Tzira, Asiya, and even Atzilus, compared to the level of light is already a Yerida. So it's an Eir that could come down to each place according to its level, and it measures itself. So if there's a table that needs life, or if there's a plant that needs life, the Eibishter's Chayis, the Eibishter's Eir, comes into that plant or into that table, into very physical, limited, small things that have a very short lifespan. They come today, they're gone tomorrow, and their quality is of a very lowly quality. It's corporal, it's physical, it's materialistic. And the light of the Eibishter lowers itself all the way down to this level in order to animate it and to create it. That's Chaim. Mekoir Chaim is one level up. Mekoir Chaim is Seviv Kolam, and this is already the level of light that's beyond coming down into this world. It's too high for it. It doesn't lower itself down to it. And we explained that there's two madregas, there's two taichin, and they form two madregas in Mekoir Chaim, in the source of light, of life. The lower madrega, when you say that it's the source of life, what are you saying? You're saying that life exists somewhere in the source, but in the source, it exists in a higher level, in a more pure form, in a more refined form. And then when it comes out of its source, then it ends up being lowered. And we used the mashal last week of a well, but perhaps I thought this week maybe a better mashal, a little harder to understand, but probably more to the point, might be midas and seichel. A mid is an emotion. I love something or I hate something. That's basically the full range of emotions. Everything is subsets of that and combinations of it. So I have an emotion that I love something. Why do I love it? Because I understand something about it in my head. But before we get to that, let's just contrast an emotion to an intellectual understanding, to seichel. An emotion, what's the quality of an emotion? It's full of movement and life and passion. You're either running away from something if you hate it, or if you're fearful of it, or you're running towards something and you can't stop until you obtain it, until you get it. And that's love. So the emotion doesn't want to understand the thing. It doesn't care about the thing. It cares about itself. It wants this thing, or it doesn't want this thing. That's a very general description of an emotion. Seichel is what? Seichel is completely different. While emotions are passionate, seichel is dispassionate. Seichel is cold. It wants to understand what's the truth about something, not that I want it or that I don't want it. What is this thing? Tell me what this thing is. So seichel is as far from emotions as you can imagine. It's a completely different thing. However, we know, as it's explained all over in Chassidus, that midas come from seichel. So even though they're completely two separate things, nevertheless, seichel is the makir, is the source for midas. And how does it work in very simple terms? When I understand the quality of something, either it's good qualities or it's negative qualities, it's not good qualities, my heart will eventually, if I think about it and if it becomes real to me in my mind, then my heart will eventually develop a certain emotion towards it. When I understood the good qualities of something, when I understood the good qualities of connecting to Hashem, when I understood the good qualities of helping another Yid, when I understood the good qualities of being selfless, then if I spend enough time in my mind and really connect to the idea, eventually I'll start feeling an emotion in my heart. If I'm going to a museum and I see paintings and I see one painting, I think about it, there's nothing special about it. This artist is not he didn't reach yet a high level of performance. Hey, you go to another one, you look at it again, nothing. Then you come to one and you see, oh, this one. You start looking into it and you see an unbelievable emotion being expressed in the art with amazing technical skill that the artist used in order to put it down on canvas, and it touches the person. And so at a certain point, he starts developing an emotion. He loves the painting. It's not just about understanding it; he loves it. So we see that there's this system where seichel, even though seichel is as different as emotion as can be, nevertheless, seichel forms the source for emotions. And if you look in seichel, you'll see the beginnings of the emotion. How do you see the beginnings of the emotion? Because the seichel itself will tell you that this is good and this is something you should want, in a seichel-dik way. It's explained in Chassidus that there's so many different levels. You can have a person who thinks about something, understands something, and says he should have this thing, and he even decides that he will have this thing. But it's all remained in the world of seichel. To Ma'aser B'Pele has nothing to do, because he didn't develop an emotion out of it yet. First he has to develop an emotion, and only then will he take action on it. So in seichel, you'll find the source, you'll see something that looks like an emotion. Because the seichel will say that this thing should be attractive to you. This thing should be of interest to you. So that's already something that's starting to look like an emotion. We went from the highest, most abstract form of seichel, where it's nothing about what should you want. It's just about what is the truth of the thing. What's the understanding of the thing? But seichel started coming to a certain conclusion, and that conclusion is you should want this thing. So you see, this is already a source for the seichel. So when you say the Mekoir Chaim, it's the source. It's a source for the midah. So when you say Mekoir Chaim, what we could mean to say that it's the source for something. If you look in the source, you'll see that thing already. Maybe in a higher form, not as a midah, not as a fully developed emotion, no passion, but you'll see it already, the beginnings of it, as cold, calculating seichel. Okay? So that's one way where you could say that something is the source for something. Another way where you could say that something is the source for something is that you could say that something came from somewhere, but you won't find it there. What do I mean? So we need a muscle to help us understand that. So the muscle that's used in this maimer, or the Alter the Rebbe's mitzayin to it, is the muscle of a flintstone, right? You have a coal. If you have a coal, even if the coal, you don't see any fire in the coal, but there's fire in it. Right? It's hot. You blow a little bit, immediately you see it. So you could see it. You just have to, maybe sometimes you have to do something so you should be able to see it. It's covered up.
The flintstone is the idea where you don't see the fire in there, but when you hit one rock against the other, you want to see a spark flying out,
exactly,
which catches the hay and then starts the fire.
Exactly.
I'll go find that spark in the stone.
Right, you can't. That's the
so
point.
you can't. So you can't.
But it's potential. That's the.
So right. Well, we'll leave that part out, but we will say that the spark came from the flintstone. But just because we're saying it came from the flintstone doesn't mean that you're going to find the spark in the flintstone. So that's a higher level of saying that something is the source for something, right? When you say that seichel is higher than midas, but it's the source of midas, if it's a source for midas, then obviously it has some sort of relationship to midas. It's not completely beyond the realm of midas. So it's higher than midas, but it's still somewhere within the level of midas. When you say that something is the makar for something, but you won't find anything of it in it, so now you could say it stands much higher than it. It stands apart and in a higher way. It's interesting to note that it's further discussed in Chassidus because it's bekayach, like you said, the spark in the flintstone. So On the one hand, the coal is the source for the fire that comes out of it, but it's a close source. It's like the source of Seichel to Midas, or like the source of Meker Chaim to the world. We'll leave that for now. But it's a close source. And since it's a close source, what does it mean? That it has the fire in it, really. And that's why if you dunk it in water, what's going to happen? It's gonna go out.
Surah Halamish, you put in the water.
Surah Halamish, because it's so abstracted away, because it stands so, it's not misnagid. He wants to learn Chassidus. So the Flintstone, because the fire is so, because the Flintstone is so far away from an actual fire and so much beyond an actual fire, you could leave it in water for 1,000,000 years, take it out, spark, no problem when it goes. And another point that's mentioned in Chassidus is it never runs out. The coal will eventually run out of fire. Why? Because it's more on the level of fire. It has fire in the Flintstone. Okay, it will get rubbed out eventually. It's not shot that it ran out of the ability to make sparks. As long as it doesn't get rubbed out and it remains in existence, you can make sparks out of it for forever. Okay, so that's the general akdama. What we said before, when we say Meker Chaim, we're removing ourselves. In other words, we're lifting up higher than Chaim, higher than the Malik Kalamin, and in two levels. The first level is we're saying that we're Meker Chaim, that we're the source, but we're a close source, and you'll find something like Mimalik Kalamin within Seviv Kalamin. And then we're saying no, but then there's another level where Meker Chaim, what do we mean to say with the words Meker Chaim? You're even beyond that. You won't find anything like the Chayas for the Ilamis in Seviv Kalamin. It's so far beyond Mimalik Kalamin, you won't find anything like it in Seviv Kalamin. And that's where we left yesterday. We're holding Eis Dalet. Now, as I akdama to today's shir, I will say as follows. The topics that are discussed in today's shir are very deep, very tiff, very subtle, and way beyond what I'm able to understand, and therefore obviously way beyond what I'm able to explain. These are topics Deborah runs through. It's like a medley of topics of the deepest ideas in Chassidus, as in 2-3 ACS, 2.5 ACS, let's say. Deborah just runs through them. So each one of these topics is discussed from Sheikh and Nachanan. So the goal in this year, and for whatever reason, I didn't even have time to prepare much for this year. My apologies. So we'll take, so that's also off the table. So the goal of this year is not to try to properly understand what's going on over here, but at least what I'm going to try to avoid is as follows. My wife told me years ago that she had a teacher in Chassidus in Beis Rivka, and the teacher was trying to explain to her that you have Atzilus and then you have Keser. So Atzilus is woe high, and Keser is woe high. So, because she lacked, what's Atzilus? I don't blame the teacher. If you want to say that something is big, you have to have some notion, some point of reference of what big is. For example, the distance between us to the sun is kind of hard to fathom, but we have some point of reference. We could say, Chamesh Me'ez Shana, yeah. Mala Chamesh Me'ez Shana, yeah, Ben Akil.
Everything is 500.
500. So we have a point of reference. So we have, and then I think it's between Shakia, yeah. So it's actually times 14 l'chura.
Right, 14.
So we have a point of reference. We know what a mahalich of an hour is. If I walk for an hour, I know how long it's going to take me. I could use that as a point of reference to also walking a whole day. In the olden days, I was pretty common. You went on Talucha much more often.
20 miles.
20 miles a person because of Malach Yom.
Yeah, that's what he says. What he brings down. Yeah.
And then a young man, and then you can.
I like that you remember 20 miles you can walk again.
And then you could extrapolate from that what it would mean to walk for a week, and you could extrapolate from that what it would mean to walk for a month. So you don't have to say whoa. You could tell the person, you know what it means to walk for an hour. So it's not a whoa. We're not saying whoa. And we could say walking for a day is much more than that. And it's not more like I can understand that. And because I have some point of reference, I can even, take it to 500 years or to 14 times 500 years. I at least have some point of reference. When we start talking about Atzilus, and then we say Keser, I don't blame the teacher for having to resort to saying, Atzilus is woe high and Keser is woe high. But we have to try. So I'm hoping that in today's year, we'll be able to get a little bit more of an idea of the distances and the differences and the different levels that we're discussing over here, where we understand a little bit more than just being able to say it's woe and woe and woe. At least we'll try to do a little bit better than that with the Abish's help. So we started off with 2 levels. One level was the highest of the worlds, and it's intuitively easy for us to understand that the amount of elikus, so to speak, and the quality of elikus, so to speak, that creates and gives life and existence to a table is a very minute, insignificant, very lowly level. It's very low. And even if you're going to want to say the life that's invested in this, or that's vested within this entire room, or the entire block, or even the entire earth, right, is very lowly. It's very low. It's very low. And now we're going to say, however, there's a level of light that's beyond that. That's beyond that. That it does not constrain itself. So we kind of have an idea of just how great the chayes of elikus in this world is, because it can give life to this table, to this room, to the block, to the city, to the entire planet, to the entire solar system, to the entire galaxy, to the entire universe. We understand that. And we understand that that must be a tremendous amount of light. And now we're going to say that there's a light that's even beyond that, that can't lower itself. It's so great that for it to say, I'm going to give chayes to an entire solar system, is too low for it. Its quality and its level is so high that it can't lower itself to even such a vast creation such as a galaxy. So understand that this must be a very high level of light and of life. And that's Mekoyer Chaim. And we did it in two steps, like we said before. One of them where it's apart from it, but not really, and the other one where it's completely apart from it. And now we're going to continue going higher and higher and higher and higher. Okay, so we got the whoa, 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 whoa. V'hinei gam lahapirish eis dalet. V'hinei gam lahapirish hakavana b'mekoyer chaim hishimenu ninsu ha'chaim. Even according to the explanation that mekoyer chaim, we actually left any connection to the life that's in this world. In other words, like the Tzorach Halamish, like the Flintstone, and here comes the point that Shimon made last week. From this that we call it Mekoyer Chaim, that we say it's the source of life, of which life? Chayes ha'elamis. It's the source of the life of the elamis. Muchach sheyesh le'shayches le'elamis. The pasuk forces us, compels us to say that it must have some sort of relationship to it. As distant and as far away as it is, and as much as it is higher than it, but there's still some sort of a connection left to the worlds, and that's why the pasuk correctly calls it Mekoyer Chaim, that is the source of life in this world. And therefore, the pasuk goes beyond this level. He moves on to a third level. Then there's the level of Be'ercha. Like the Rebbe brought from the Frierdiker Rebbe, that the pasuk goes from the lower levels to the higher levels. So Be'ercha is even higher than Mekoyer Chaim. The Orech hu l'mayla mishayches la'elamis, because Orech is even higher than having a connection to Elamis. Now the Rebbe is going to further take apart this statement than when we say Orech is higher than a shayches to Elamis. So for now, we're going to say that Orech is higher than having a shayches to Elamis, but we're going to come to a conclusion that really you can't truly say that Orech is higher than having a connection to Elamis. So let's see how it goes. But for now, we're going to leave it at this, that Chaim is the Orech that's actually in this world. Mekoyer Chaim is the Orech that only has a shayches to the worlds, but it's completely beyond the worlds. Orech is something that you can't even say has any connection to this world. And that's why we use the word Orech. We went from using the word Chaim in the pasuk, or Mekoyer Chaim, but we're still referencing the idea of Chaim, of life. And now we're going, where the pasuk finds the need to use a new term, which is the term of Orech, which helps us understand it as a concept. What's the concept of light? The concept of light is that it's always connected to its source, to the light source, like the rays of the sun. The light of the sun is always connected to the sun itself. And it is similar to the light itself. So I looked in Sefer Maram Tafshin Gimel a little bit, at least quickly, and the basic idea, the basic explanation that he gives over there, the chlolus al kopanim, is that what's light? Light is something that is an expression of the thing that gives light. The light of the sun is what? It's an expression, it's an emanation that comes out of the sun. The sun creates light. You can have light in the sun, and you can have light out of the sun, right? It's obvious to us, and that within the sun's light shines also. Okay? So it's the same light that shines within the sun that now shines out of the sun. Just like when the light was within the sun, it wasn't a separate existence. It was just part of the sun. So too, when the light comes out of the sun, it doesn't become a separate existence. It's nothing more than an extension of the sun. It's a hispashtus. The term that's used for the Chassidus is it's a hispashtus of the shemesh. The oid of the shemesh is not something new. It's an extension. It's a hispashtus. So then what's the difference? What's the difference when the light is in the sun to when the light is out of the sun? So when the light is in the sun, because it's still within its source, so we don't call it an independent entity. Yes, it's light, but we don't give it a name for itself. It's just part of the sun. It's part of the closed sun. Once it leaves the area of its makar, once it comes out to a new area, so yes, it's not something new, but it's also not within its source. It came to a place where the source no longer exists. So something extended out, and it's no longer the source itself. It extended out to a new place. In one sense, we say that it's nothing new. There's nothing new. The light is nothing new, and that's why it's davuk b'mekere, and that's why it's me'ein hamoyer, because it's the same thing. It's the same type of a thing. But once it leaves its source, it's not within its source. We have to give it a title and a name now. We say it's a hispashtus. It's an extension. So in other words, it's not the thing itself. Okay. So yes, it's oir. We're calling it light. We're not calling it moir. We're not calling it the source of light itself. But nevertheless, this oir is always davuk b'hamoir. It's not a new thing, and it's me'ein hamoir. It's not a different type of a thing. It is merely an extension, a continuation of the sun, just outside of where the sun exists. Before it was within its source, and now it exists and resides outside of its source. I tried to explain a little ahead, but now that we're going to read now inside. In short, the bottom line that Rebbe takes from this point is that it's not a mitzias. It's not an existence. It's a nothingness. And because it's not an existence, since it's not an existence, so therefore it can't make something else. There's nothing here, so it won't make anything else. If it was something, so it could do something. The light of the sun is nothing. It's just an extension. It's just a revelation of the sun itself. But to say that the light is now going to become the source or something else doesn't make any sense, because the light doesn't have anything with it. It's not the type of a thing that has something to it. I'm just mirroring, I'm just expressing my source. Perhaps a muscle that we could use is that you say a person could do things. Yeah, a person could do things, a lot of things, many things. What if you have a person's image in a mirror? Mamish, the mirror, the image in the mirror is mamish, looks the same like the person, but the image in the mirror can't do anything. It's a revelation of the person. You're seeing the person. So it has no potential. The image in the mirror has no potential for action. It's just a revelation of what's going on, of what the person is doing. I don't know if it's a good muscle, but the sun itself is a thing. And therefore, it can serve as the source for something, namely light. Light comes out of it. But the light itself has no mitzias. It's just an extension of the sun. So it can't do anything. It can't be a source for the worlds. And that's the bottom line, Benegea, to our Maimer. That when we go to Orech, we changed our terminology from life, from Chayim, and we started using the term Oir. Why? Because Bichlalos, anytime you use the word Oir, you're saying something that's not Bimitzias. It's Davok Bimekere, it's Me'ein Mekere. It's not something that it's a Mitzias, and therefore it can never be a Makir for something. And therefore, if we say Orech, we must mean to say something that is beyond Shaykhis to Elamis. It's not a Makir, it's not a source for the worlds, it's completely beyond the worlds. Okay? So to summarize what the Rebbe said over here is that we went from discussing the source of the worlds to discussing a level in Elikus that's beyond even being the source for worlds. You can't call it a source for worlds. And that's why he calls it Oir, because Oir expresses this idea because it's not a Metzias and therefore it's not a source for anything. Okay? So we left now the levels of Elikus that can even be called a source for the worlds. However, we didn't stop say Oir, we said Oircha. Said Oircha. So now we're going to go even higher and get even into more subtle concepts that are even harder to grasp, but we're going higher. Omedayik ba'Orech. He says Orech. He doesn't say Oir, he says Orech. In addition to what the Rebbe just explained about Oir in general. Even the way Oir is an extension of the Moed. In other words, the way it extended and now exists as light that emanates from the source, but it's not in the source. It's not a mitzias. What's its whole thing? It's an extension and a revelation of the Moed, of the source of light. Within light itself, we're saying Hu Orech Oir Shelcha Oir HaKolol Batzmusay. We're saying that this is we're referencing a level of oir which is kolol batzmusay, and we'll start with that in a moment. So what David said is, once we use the term oir, we already left anything that could be a mocker for oilimus. We're beyond that, but we're going a level deeper. We're not satisfied with that. The pasuk is actually talking about an even deeper level, which is oircha, your light, the Eibishter's light. What does it mean that it's the Eibishter's light? It means that it's the light that's kolol batzmusay. It's the light that's included in the essence of the Eibishter. If anybody could help explain what that means, please. But it's explained. If we learned more Chassidus, we would be able to at least use, more asius and more descriptions and try to bring it closer to us. But what's Eira Kol Batzmusay? So you say you have, to use very simplistic terms, you say you have the Eibishter himself. Everybody understands that the Eibishter himself, you can't call him high. He's beyond the idea of being high. It's a quality. You can't even say he's a certain quality type of a thing. There's no words. The Eibishter is so beyond anything that even to say that he's beyond anything is already, you're lowering him. There's nothing to describe. So in general, when we say Atzmusay, when we say the Eibishter, to put it into simple terms, we mean to say the Eibishter himself. Even though there's many Madregas in Atzmus. But Bechlalos, we mean to say the Eibishter himself. Okay? And when we say Orech, we mean to say which level of light? We mean to say the level of light that's included within the Eibishter. The level of light that's included within the Eibishter, it didn't leave Kaviyachal, this level that we still call the Eibishter himself. Let's try to explain that a little bit more. We, of course, understand that everything exists within the Eibishter. There is no place that exists outside of the Eibishter, like it says, Hine Mokim Iti, right? When the Eibishter showed Moshe Rabbeinu the Yirgimel Midas Rachamim, anybody remember the pasuk? But the lesson of the pasuk is that there's a mokim iti, there's a place with me, and Rashi comments on it that it's a strange choice of words. Usually we say I'll be in a certain place. The Eibishter doesn't say that. The Eibishter says there's a mokim iti, there's a place within me, because everything is within the Eibishter, right? So when we say that it's something that's outside of Atzmos, something that's kiviyachol outside of the Eibishter himself, we're not necessarily mean to say something is outside of the Eibishter. What do we mean to say? We mean to say the way the Eibishter allows us to see this level, the way we perceive it, the way we experience it, it appears to us as something that is not part of the Eibishter. It appears to us to be something that's not part of Atzmos. It's something that came from the Eibishter. I could say at the same time that I say this whole world was created by the Eibishter and came from the Eibishter, I could say, but it's not Atzmos, it's not the Eibishter himself, it's something that the Eibishter made. And this is a mistake that many people make, where they think Taka, I'm not talking about from a Yid and Chassidim, they think that Taka, the world is Taka outside of the Eibishter. It came from within him, but he placed it outside of him, so to speak, in short. We don't mean that. What we mean to say is in the level of how it perceives itself and how we perceive of ourselves. We feel ourselves to be not part of the essence of the Eibishter. That's the way he wants us to our reality to be, even though we know it's not true. So, Atzmus is any level that feels itself to be part of the Eibishter. It didn't yet leave the Eibishter. Outside of Atzmus is levels where the Eibishter hid himself, concealed himself, took away the ability to feel his true existence, and only let a very small amount of light of his existence come out over there. That's outside of Atzmus. Okay? So Eid HaKolol Batzmusay is a level of light that's so pure and so attached to the Eibishter that we can still say it's within the Eibishter himself, because it perceives itself and feels itself completely part of the Atzmos, the essence of the Eibishter himself.
Where you are right now?
In Reish Ayin Hey, turn at 2 pages. The 5th line, at the end of the 5th line from the top. Reish Ayin Hey. It's double-sided, so I guess it's 1 page. Turn over here on the page that you have now, Reish Ayin Hey, 5 lines from the top at the end. So when we say that it's Eir HaKolol Batzmusay, what do we mean when we say Eir HaKolol Batzmusay? The Bechlalos who Eir Insaf Shalifnei HaTzimtzum. What do we say is still within the Atzmos of the Eibishter, and what do we say is already outside the Atzmos of the Eibishter? So Bechlalos, the Eir Insaf Shalifnei HaTzimtzum, the Eir Insaf that precedes, that exists before there was the great Tzimtzum, that is the Eir HaKolol Batzmusay. Before it comes to Kol Shalifnei HaTzimtzum, Eir HaKolol Batzmusay. What's the Tzimtzum? Yeah, when it says the Tzimtzum without any qualifications, it means the Tzimtzum Arishin, the great Tzimtzum, the initial Tzimtzum, where before the Tzimtzum there was only Eibishter, or we'll see who is Shmai, we'll get to that in a moment, but there was only Eibishter, and after the tzimtzum now there's other existences. Kivyochel, apparently. What's the tzimtzum harishan? The tzimtzum harishan is different than all other tzimtzumim. All other tzimtzumim, at the very least, constrict something. They make it less. So it's the same thing that it was before, just much, much less. And then there's a different type of tzimtzum, a tzimtzum in a ifin of parsa, which is a different type of tzimtzum. It actually parsa. It's called a parsa, a curtain, which is even more than that. It doesn't only make the light less; it actually transforms it. No, it doesn't only diffuse it; it transforms it. It changes it. It's you can't call it the same thing once it makes it through the parsa. So it's called a curtain because just like when you draw the curtain, the light can't come in. So something else. The only thing that comes in, it has to be something else entirely. So, however, tzimtzum harishan is even beyond that. Tzimtzum harishan, there's no way to say that something came through it. And in fact, we say that nothing came through it. There was a chalo. The Eibishter made a tzimtzum, and now there was a void. There was an emptiness. You can ask if there's an emptiness. Obviously, there's some place that's empty. We won't get into that. But there's a makom chalo. So not even a parsa. It's not shot that after the tzimtzum harishan, now something that was transformed came. Because any time that you'll transform atzmos, it's still going to be atzmos. You can't transform atzmos. Atzmos you must remove. Lower levels, you can transform them, and even lower levels, you can restrict them and make them less. Atzmos is a different type of tzimtzum. It's the Eibishter had to remove himself. And there's a chalal amak and pani.
Everything's infinite. So when there's infinite, there's no room for anything other than infinite. Hashem had to.
So you're saying so what you're
had to, it could be nothing below it.
So what you're saying is that when we're dealing with finite numbers, and I tell you, I have a number that's a million zeros. So right? So when did they say? I think everyone said about zeros, add a zero, but in the right place, after the one, not before. Yeah. Anyways, so a million zeros after the one, not a million zeros before the one. So you have this vast number, but it's a finite number. It's a finite number, so I could divide it in half. So now I just limited it. So that's one type of a tzimtzum, and then divide that half further into half. That's one type of a thing. If I'm dealing from infinity, you could transform it. You could transform.
That could be Hashem's intervention.
Hold on. No, what I'm saying is the way I understand it, you brought a mashal for explaining to us where you have to have a parsa, because you're calling this infinity.
No, why you have to have tzimtzum rishon?
So I don't think you could use it for tzimtzum rishon. Lani Estaiti, you can't use it for tzimtzum rishon. Why? Because infinity is also a definition of something.
Well, it's the best word we have as human beings to describe something that has no end. That's the best word we have. We have no other word.
That's if you're trying to positively describe the Eibishter. If you're trying to describe atzmos in mitzad chiyuv, in a seichel chiyuvi, what's called. If you're trying to positively identify him, he's like this, he's like this, he's like this. So the best idea of something to come to, we could say infinity. But really, we know that doesn't capture the Eibishter, and we are capable as human beings to understand a little bit deeper than that if we move to a different type of understanding, which is shlila, yediyas hashlila, saying what he's not. And we could say that he's not infinity, because even infinity itself is nothing compared to him. So now when we move into the realm of yediyas hashlila, we could go a little bit beyond infinity. We made an introduction before we started that the concepts of this of the next few oisias are beyond what we could really understand, but we're just trying to do our best with it. Okay. So l'chura, the way I understand I can't say if you're right or wrong, but the infinity versus finite numbers is an example of why you don't need to transform things, or you do need to transform. To go from infinity to finite numbers, you need a transformation. You can't make infinity less. It's still infinity. However, when we're talking about the tzimtzum harishan, even to say I'm restricting infinity is doesn't capture it, because we're not dealing with infinity, we're dealing with atzmos. And you can't do nothing to atzmos. The only thing
I will understand that Hashem had to do that in order to give room for oilness and oilam has and all that. Or else none of this could exist.
Right. But what did he have to do? That's what we're trying. So we're saying that there's three types of tzimtzum that I'm aware of and that's discussed in Chassidus. One type of a tzimtzum is a regular tzimtzum, the standard tzimtzum where you make something less than what it was before. And another type of a tzimtzum is a tzimtzum even of a parsa, where you have to completely stop what was there before, change it, transform it, and now you can let whatever you transformed it into, you can let it through. And then there's the tzimtzum harishan, which doesn't let anything through at all. Nothing comes through at all. What was there before is no longer there, not even in a transformed way. What was there is no longer there anymore. And that's why there was a chol makom pani. What did the Eibishter do? Then the Eibishter was mamshich a new light. He was mamshich the kav. This is a new light. It's not that he didn't transform things. A new type of thing that's not atzmos at all. He brought it down into the makom pani, into the chol makom pani. Okay, so we said that you have Orech. Orech is something that's beyond being a source for the world. It's beyond having any shaykhs to the world. But the pasuk didn't stop there. The pasuk said Orecha, the Eibishter is Orech. So we're talking about a Orech that's kolul ba'atzmusai, which he helped us now understand, which means it's a Orech that's lifnei hatzimtzum before the tzimtzum rishon. So it's a light that's still within the Eibishter's atzmus, so to speak.
You said that Tzimtzum Rishon was the space.
Was the complete removal kivyachol of the Eibishter or of his atzmus, whichever way you want to put it.
Space.
And now what space was left. Yes, and now space was left. And before you walked in, we made a disclaimer to say that we are only talking about in appearances. We're only talking about in experiences and perceptions and what's real to us, because the truth is that the essence of the Eibishter is everywhere and anywhere and was never removed from anywhere. We're talking about in what the things that exist within those areas, within those spaces, what can they experience? So before the Tzimtzum Harishin, they were able to experience Atzmos. The types of things that exist there are able to experience Atzmos. After the Tzimtzum Harishin, Atzmos cannot be experienced at all, because he completely removed himself. He cannot experience Atzmos. Okay. So when we say Orecha, we're talking about this light that existed within Atzmos before the Tzimtzum Harishin. The Oir zeh hu l'mayla mishayches le'elamis. And this light is higher than having a shayches te'elamis. If you go before to the top or to the bottom of the previous page, the Orecha hu l'mayla mishayches le'elamis v'lechein nikra b'shem Oir. He was talking in a more general terms and more general concepts. He said any Oir is already higher than shayches te'elamis. Now he modifies it. And he says, really, if you want to talk about Eiris that are beyond having any connection, any relationship with this world, so you have to actually talk about Orecha, because Orecha is before the Tzimtzum. And before the Tzimtzum Harishin, there was no room for worlds at all. So the Eiris there, when we say Eiris is higher than shayches te'elamis, we mean to say really Orecha. And that's why Taka, this light had to be completely removed before the worlds were formed. Okay? So what type of light is Orecha in our understanding right now? Again, Deborah's going to modify it again in the next days. But in our understanding now, what would we say is Orecha? Until the world was created. Prior to when the world was created, you had nothing. He says, what was there? He doesn't call it Oir. He uses a different term. The Chazal say, Hu Ushmai, him and his name. That's all that existed before the Tzimtzum. So the Ha'ir Shalifnei HaTzimtzum, when we say Shmai, we're talking about Ha'ir Shalifnei HaTzimtzum, and the ACS of Chassidus HaKolpan. The Ha'ir Shalifnei HaTzimtzum, the Tchilas HaIbriya Hi HaTzimtzum, Ascholas HaIbriya Hi HaTzimtzum, the beginning of all creation, is the Tzimtzum V'Achloi Nivra Elam Lifnei HaTzimtzum, when Chazal say Achloi Nivra Elam, they mean to say Lifnei HaTzimtzum. So this light, we're going to use a new word to describe this light, and we're going to call it Nikra Shmai. We're going to call it the name. Why are we using a different word? Because a word, of course, contains a concept. It expresses an idea. What's the idea of Shmai, of the name of somebody? It says as follows: the Adam, just like the name of a person is of no existence whatsoever. It's not even like the existence of light, and that's the key word over here. Then when you call a person by his name, the person himself turns to the person who's calling him. What did we say before? We said before that Eid is not a Metzias La'atzmai. Eid is Me'ein HaMoed, it's Davuk Ba'amoed. Eid is nothing more than an extension of the light. The same light that existed previously within the sun now exists outside the sun, but it's not something new. There isn't a new existence, a new type of a thing over here. The moon is a new type of a thing. The light that comes from the sun is the same thing that was within the sun itself. So it's the way the light of the sun exists outside of itself. So we say it's not a Metzias. It's the light of the sun. It's not a Metzias on its own, but nevertheless, it's an extension. There's something here. The light, the sun's light is an extension of the sun outside of itself. And that's why we're uncomfortable using the word Oir. It doesn't quite express the idea of the Oir Shlifnei HaTzimtzum. To explain the idea of the Orech Lifnei Tzimtzum, we have to use a new concept, a new idea, which is Shmoi, the name of a person. What happens when you call a person by his name? Somebody's called Yankel. You call Yankel. The word Yankel, who reacts to the name epis? You got the name. You brought down the name Yankel.
He knows that that's his name.
So the person himself turns to you. When you say Yankel, there's no Yankel that turns to you. The person who's called Yankel turns to you. The name itself is nothing. It's not even an extension of the person. It's not pshat that when you call somebody by his name, you awaken something within the person that he should extend something outside of him so that he should not talk to you. It's yeah. What you're talking about over here is the person himself turns to you. So what's a name? A name is even more of a nothing than a oir. Oir we call nothing because it's nothing new, but it's an extension of what was there before and outside of it. It's an extension of the sun outside of the sun. So something it still has, it's outside of its source. Shmai, when we say is nothing, we mean to say it's absolutely nothing. Because when you call somebody by his name, the only thing that happens is the person himself turns to you. The name is nothing. There's no Yankel. There's the person.
But when someone chalash is you call his name, you wake him up that way.
Adrabah, that makes the point. How are you waking him up? What happened? His life is leaving his body. He's in a fainted state. What's going to work to get him back? You have to bring back his life itself. So when you call him by his name, you're not calling a level within him. You're causing the person himself to react and to come back to his body. So that's the emphasis. The Adam. So similarly, this is the idea of the Orech Lifnei Tzimtzum. It's not a mitzias, not even like the extension of the light. It's even not. It's less of a mitzias than that. It's the name. And that's why Taka says, Hu Shmoi Bilvad, the Eibishter and his name alone. Ha'ara 20 is a very interesting Ha'ara. I don't want to read it inside due to time constraints. But the basic idea that the Rebbe gives more Asius to help us understand these concepts. And he says that what do you call the light after the Tzimtzum? What do you call the light of the Shemesh? You call it the Hispashtus, an extension of the sun. What do you call Shmoi, which is before the Tzimtzum? That you call a revelation. In other words, the only thing that Shmoi accomplishes is that it reveals the person himself. It doesn't extend the person. The light of the sun extends the sun. The sun itself is relatively small compared to all the places where its light reaches. So the light of the sun extends the sun. So if you're extending it, there's some mitzias over here. Shmoi, a name, doesn't extend the thing. It merely reveals it. That's what he says in Ha'ara 20. Okay. Yeah? I think we're going to leave it here. I was hoping to go through Eis Hey. I will just give an introduction to help us carry over. What the Rebbe is going to say is that really all of this that we just finished discussing is really part of Mekoir Chaim. We didn't yet get to the true level of Orech. We didn't really yet get to the true Madrega of Orech.
It reveals the person. It reveals his appearance, his face. Because he said that the name is nothing.
There's the famous story. There's the famous. Thank you for coming. There's the famous story with Alter Rebbe, and I believe it was the Tzemach Tzedek. If I have the names or the details wrong, but the general idea is correct. Where the Alter Rebbe asked the Tzemach Tzedek, I believe, who is Zaidi, right? What's Zaidi? And he pointed to his nose and he asked him, "Das is Zaidi." So Tzemach Tzedek said no. He pointed to his eyes. Das is Zaidi. So he said no. That's Tzemach Tzedek said no. Later on, the Tzemach Tzedek was playing, as is well known. The Tzemach Tzedek used to spend all of his time right next to the Alter Rebbe because the Tzemach Tzedek's mother had Mesiras Nefesh, so that the Alter Rebbe could live and continue the work of spreading Chassidus. So the Tzemach Tzedek used to possibly be around the Alter Rebbe the whole time, and he heard himself, and he gave a scream. He said, "Oy, ow," whatever it was, and the Alter Rebbe turned to him to see what happened to him, and Tzemach Tzedek pointed and said, "Das is Zaidi. This is Zaidi." Das is Zaidi. So you see that you could call somebody and you're not getting just his face, his appearance. You got his attention, so to speak. The Alter Rebbe turned to him. The Alter Rebbe himself turns to him. That's what we mean to say when we say Shmoi, that you're calling somebody, that you're bringing him. He's coming to where the he, whatever the he is. Yeah, whatever the he is. And Shekayach and Mitzvah Hashem next week.